at a small meeting that the consulting firm Alvarez and Marcel had hosted on M&A in higher ed. And you talked there about the importance of preparing a board for thinking about a merger. Can you say more about that? Like, when did you start thinking this, and particularly how you thought about the composition of the board going into what is such a, monumental decision for an institution?
Yeah, I think there's preparing the college and preparing the board. And I think in our favor, we had a president that came to us early to talk about just both opportunities and challenges. And those challenges were, declining enrollments over a period of years, rising costs that the COVID epidemic obviously accelerated. But we were not in dire straits. We were not at a point of no return, but we had tough choices to make. And so the first thing that we did was sort of look around the boardroom. And not surprisingly, higher ed has typically large boards, upwards of 24 oftentimes. And, historically has mostly been alumni, trustees. These are volunteer positions, typically alumni, and very philanthropic. So we said to ourselves, look, that's all well and good, and they obviously have the college's best interests at heart, but do we have the right folks around the table and in the room, or do we have blind spots? Because we're going to have to do sort of a search far and wide for options, and we're going to have to make decisions that are in the long-term best interests of our community. And so we had sort of the loyal and the faithful, but we knew what we didn't have. Look, I had also, while been an alum, been in corporate America, been in business, done compliance, done risk, done audit. We needed to strengthen the board in relation to finance, in terms of regulatory, because we don't operate sort of on an island. We operate in a broader context. So we made and we did outreach. We brought in people from not-for-profit who were familiar with that world, and those that had done, partnerships and been engaged in M&A. So we had a terrific mix, and we did that before we were on a path in particular. So I'll say we started with board composition and said, do we have the right folks around the table in the room? Do we have blind spots? We worked on board composition, and then we worked on the committee structure. And the first thing that we did was we put together a strategic opportunities committee to say we need to make a dedicated effort to look at our future. And it can't be off to the side, and it can't be something that we talk about as a full board only at board meetings every quarter. That wasn't going to do. So I would say those were the two big things that we did off the bat. The third thing was to say, look, before, I think oftentimes people get it in their head, I'm going to look for a partner. I'm going to merge. As I said, we didn't have an outcome in mind. But we said, before we travel down a path and look at our options and look at opportunities, what matters to us? So the first order of business for the Strategic Opportunities Committee was to put together priority attributes. What are the must-haves about who we are as an institution and the community that we serve? What are the nice-to-haves? And what's the okay if we don't have? And I will say that became our North Star for looking at our future.